Hello, and welcome to another episode of ReelPR. Today with me, Lauren. I'm joined by somebody today who I know quite well, and we work with actually within our business to help us with our PR. I'm not going to introduce Jo, I'll let her do that herself. And it'd be nice to talk to Jo today and see about the differences between our business. Jo, I'm going to let you introduce yourself, so over to you.
Oh, thank you, Lauren, and hello. And it's very odd because I'm usually asking you questions and I'm never on the receiving end, so this is all a bit weird. So I run a PR business myself called Word Worker, and I have a number of clients in and around the Wiltshire, Swindon, Gloucestershire, Bath, Bristol area who I help get their messages out. Very similar way to Scott Media. But I also collaborate quite closely with Scott Media with a couple of mutual clients, which is great fun to do. And also, I am entrusted to do your PR, which is really great because I never do my own PR. So to do another PR company's PR is a bit cat will eat itself or whatever it is, but it's lovely. So that's me.
And it's really helpful for us because I think when you're doing other people's PR, it's easy to draw messages out and stories because that's what we do. I know that we find that quite difficult ourselves in telling our own stories.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's really hard, which is why that's my original point. I'm rubbish at doing my own PR, but I recognise the value of it clearly, and I really enjoy doing other people's, and I love getting the messages out there. So it's really great to be able to help Scott Media because you do fantastic things. And as I say, we're working in a similar area, but I think it's all about collaboration, not competition. And as you know, I've known Fiona for more years than I care to mention, and we work really well together. So it's just really nice to sort of just share ideas and collaborate a bit, either informally or formally, and to sort of get Scott Media's PR out there too. And you've got lots of good news stories to tell. So what's not to like?
And it's good that we let you draw them out rather than us thinking about them ourselves, because that's the
Yeah,
difficult part.
yeah.
That's a really lovely thing to say about sort of, it's not about competition, it's collaboration. I think there's a lot of businesses out there nowadays that are following suit with that, but also some that don't, and they just see it as one big competition when going out there. Talk to me about networking. I know you do a lot of networking, and that's where maybe I come across people that think of us as competition, and I'm very much of the same ilk of you. It's a nice conversation to collaborate. Talk to me
No,
about talk to me.
absolutely. Well, I do some networking. I'm not that prolific. I used to do a lot more, but I'm old and tired and lazy now, really. But I do go out and about, and I think it's very much people buy from people. So if my services are useful to somebody and they like me, great. But if I'm not for them, I would equally recommend Scott Media and Fiona and yourselves. And in fact, actually, that has happened before. For example, in the dim and distant past, I was doing some work for an accountant. In fact, I still am doing work for an accountant. And I was approached by another local accountant to see if I could support them. It wasn't, it was a clear conflict of interest. So it was a very, very easy and obvious thing to do to recommend Fiona because, I know, like, and trust her just as much as all her clients do. So yeah, easy thing to do. And it is about collaborating. It's not about competing because there's an awful lot of businesses out there. Some of them want PR, some of them won't, but I think there's plenty of work to go around. And networking is a great way to meet people, make those connections and get that work in.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you remember how you met Fiona?
Yes, I do. We were working on the advert. I can't remember the first day I met her, but I was working on the advert already. I was there as a trainee. I think I was qualified by then. And Fiona arrived at some point. She'd been working on a paper in Bath, I think. Um, yeah, we always got on really well, actually. And we have so much in common. As you know, we're the same age, we've got the same birthday.
Yeah.
And get this, we've even got the same wedding anniversary, although we aren't married to each other. I'm married to Chris and Fiona is married to Steve, and we got married a few years before, I think, but we got the same wedding anniversary. So we tracked each other's career paths in a very similar way. Although I stayed in newspapers, went into PR, Fiona obviously newspapers, TV into PR, so slightly different, but
That's what
similar.
I was sort of leading to. You've both had very similar when I talked to the both of you, you've had very similar career paths in that aspect. And that's the bit that I want to talk to you about now, actually, is just sort of
Yeah.
how you started. And because I think for a lot of PRs that I've met, especially having worked with you, and I know the benefits of having been a journalist in that aspect first. So talk to me about where you started, Jo.
Well, it was back in the university days actually, and I did a history degree at Warwick. And this is going a very long time ago, and I got interested in the local, beg your pardon, the university newspaper. My parents were always avid newspaper readers. We'd always had news on in the house, newspapers in the house. It was kind of important part of my life was being familiar with what was going on. So I was interested in that anyway. Started working, joined the new university newspaper called the Warwick Boar. I became the news editor, and I thought, actually, do you know, I'd quite like to do this for a career. I was doing history, and it teaches you some very good skills that are transferable, finding out about lots of different things and trying to condense it down into one, university, an essay, but obviously for news reporting, it'd be a story or a feature. So I got a copy of, I think, Whitting's Press Guide, and I wrote to every single local newspaper that I could find in the country that was a daily, and I got replies back from almost none, apart from the Swindon Advertiser. So I got a job there. I also got on a couple of journalism courses, but my dad would have had to have paid for me to go on the courses, and I got offered a job where I was paid, and he said, explain to me why you're not taking the job and why you want to go to this City of London journalism course. So anyway, I got the job, so that was it really. And I was a trainee reporter. That's how it all started.
Amazing. So, and then tell me then, how did you end up in PR?
Well, that was a bit of a roundabout process in a way. Well, it wasn't a roundabout process, but it wasn't particularly intentional. I love journalism. I really enjoyed working in journalism, and I probably would have stayed, but it wasn't particularly well paid. And so when I had my first baby, I went back part-time. I was a sub-editor by then, which is putting the pages together and page planning. It's all done by computers now, I think, these days. That's another story about what's happened to local journalism. But at the time, they had people working there. And when I had my second baby, if I'd have carried on working part-time, my take-home pay would have covered the nursery fee.
Yeah.
So it just didn't make sense really. So I left my employed job and I started freelancing. So I did lots of freelancing for women's magazines and parenting magazines, lots of feature writing, which I particularly enjoy, sort of the longer form writing. And then a former colleague of mine was working in PR in actually what was the Great Western Railway then, and then it became First Group. I think it's back to Great Western Trains now, isn't it? Anyway, she was working there, and she said, "Jo, could you come and give me a hand?" So that was it. That's how I fell into PR, really. Yeah, so that was my first bit. So I went into corporate PR, then I worked in agency PR, and I thought, well, I can probably do this myself, because I think there's a real benefit to having somebody in PR who's been a journalist and on the receiving end of press releases that come in. So you kind of know what's newsworthy and what's not newsworthy, and what's going to be of interest, really.
Yeah, absolutely. What's the difference, main difference you would say between doing corporate PR and doing PR for smaller businesses?
Um, I think the main difference is if you're working for a company, you're only focusing on their PR. So this was going a long time ago, but I was working for the train company, and then I did a bit for Network Rail as well. You've just got one topic and one client, the people you're working for. Whereas if you're running an agency, working with an agency, you'll have a number of different clients. I mean, bigger agencies might specialize in a particular area, but I think it's more interesting that way because there's more variety. So that's the biggest difference, really.
That's absolutely the thing that I think I found most important when I moved over to this, similar to, coming back to work after having a little one. That change in career, the main thing for me has been the difference in now working with loads of different industries, loads of different people. And I find that so incredibly interesting. And it sparks a bit of a light in me that I don't think I ever had before.
Oh, that's really good.
and,
Yeah.
and asking people questions and finding out about them and the things that are going on in their business. How do you draw stories out of people? Sometimes people
Ooh.
tell me I don't have a story to tell. Tell me how you draw stories out of people.
Oh, well, do you know, that's I'm just nosy, so I just start chatting to people, and a lot of my clients are more B2B than B2C, so they're service-based clients, and they'll have something new they've launched, or they'll have an anniversary, or we'll just start talking around the subject of what's been going on, just getting to know their company, what they do, what their particularly who their target audience is, and just trying to find those interesting stories. I mean, it's hard not to go off at a tangent sometimes, because you'd be talking to somebody on a personal level who's with your client, they tell you something really interesting, but it may not necessarily fit particularly with the story they want to tell for the business.
Mhm.
Um, So I do more business PR than perhaps brand PR and personal profile raising PR. But yes, I'm just nosy, and I've just got used to asking lots of questions over the years, really. So and I think it's having that skill as a former journalist to spot what is newsworthy, because people will. It's surprising, and I think Fiona will probably agree with this, how people can't identify those newsy stories, and yet they'll think other things are newsy.
Mm.
So it's just trying to spot those newsworthy stories and then running with it.
And how do you deal with that when someone brings you something that's they think is absolutely newsworthy, they're going to get loads of coverage on? How do you deal with that when you think this isn't quite what we're needing?
Oh, well, there's a lot of expectation management, I think, actually. I mean, you just have to explain, because if somebody's, has literally invented the best thing since sliced bread, it's probably newsworthy. But if they've just invented another loaf of sliced bread, it probably isn't. And obviously, people are very passionate about their subjects, but and rightly so. But it's just trying to explain that what they think is great and is great has to interest the readers of whatever the media they want to appear in. And if it doesn't interest those readers, then they're not going to get it placed as either free editorial or potentially
Mhm.
paid for content. It just won't work. And I think people are understanding of that, actually. But expectation management, have to do quite a bit of that.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot more to it than isn't there? Just writing a story and sending it out. There's a
Yeah,
other
definitely.
personal sides that go
Yeah.
behind that. What's been your sort of biggest bugbear, would you say, of storytelling? For us, I would say, and you might agree with this as your
Mhm.
um is photos and data.
Yes. Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. Actually, all the time, because if you send a press release off with a story, sure as eggs, it won't get used. Sorry, if you send a press release off without a photo, it won't get used. If you've got a photo, they'll use it. And not only will they use it, it's used more, if it's in printed format, it's used more space. So it just makes sense, really. So to not have a photo is, and to not invest in professional photography is frustrating.
Mm.
And actually, that argument is slightly being knocked on the head by the media themselves, because they are so interested. In the older days, you'd have photographers working at local newspapers. Well, you don't now. So it's all about user generated content, is it UGC. So they're happy now to publish, I won't say any old thing, but they're happy to publish stuff, photos that be submitted by the readers. But if you're trying to represent your business as a professional business, and you send a poor photograph
Yeah.
in that's clearly been taken. I mean, there's nothing wrong with using a smartphone camera as long as it's quality and it looks good. But to use a poor image just doesn't give the right impression for your business, really. So investing in a good library of stock photos is very important. But invariably, there's not a willingness to do that. So I'll have to resort to say, well, okay, get something on a smartphone, obviously landscape, and try and set it up like this, and then keep my fingers crossed.
Mm. Are you finding with things sort of changing, especially I would say in social media and the way that people are now creating and putting their content out there? Um, have you seen any sort of need for video or anything like that for to go with stories?
Do you know, I haven't actually, not personally. I don't know if you and Fiona have. I
It's
haven't been
not
asked
something
for
we've
that.
had yet, but I think we were having a conversation with a client this week and we thought they've got a very big following on Instagram and TikTok, which is
Yeah,
something maybe that's where their profile is raised most. Whereas, we're saying, are you then pushing that over to your website as well to make
yeah.
sure that you've got full control of that. But if there's something that's then relevant to a story, there's no reason nowadays that might not be used in terms of selling something online or putting a story up there online.
Do you know, I hadn't actually thought about it, and I haven't been asked for it. I can see from a media outlet, say newspaper and magazine's point of view,
Mm.
that if they put up a link to or a video playing, they'd have to embed it in their site. Otherwise, they're going to lose readers over to wherever the video is. So maybe that's a step or a hurdle that needs to
Mm.
be overcome. But yeah, you're quite right, because a lot of it is all about more clickbait, isn't it? Let's have that nice photo, let's
That's
have
it.
that nice video to click on, that we get pushed all the time. So I suspect that will come. I suspect that will come.
And saying about sort of the way that people are consuming content and now how they're writing content and using, obviously we touched on it lightly earlier, the use of AI, and the way that people are doing that. From your point of view, what's the benefit of still using someone to do their PR as opposed to now chucking a prompt into AI somewhere and asking them to write up a story? Tell me your thoughts on where that's going.
Well, that's an interesting one actually, because AI is without doubt a very useful tool. And we're talking about writing your copy. I mean, obviously it does everything, doesn't it? It can do everything. But Gemini, ChatGPT are useful tools, and I also do a lot of copywriting, and I'll use it myself just for idea generating or rephrasing things. And then I say it's a tool rather than an endpoint for me. You could say to ChatGPT, "Here are my bullet points. Write this into a press release." I do think they're a bit bland, and they probably don't have quite the finesse that somebody like myself or you or Fiona would have. But then you've got your press release written by ChatGPT saying it might have everything you need in it. It might have a really strong intro, some quotes from yourself, the who, what, why, where, when, how, all the information you need. But do you know what to do with it? So if you don't know what to do with it and you think, what do I do with this now? Oh, I'll just, have a Google and send it to, well, it's not going to land really. So you need somebody like myself or Fiona or you to have those connections with the media that you want it placed in. Or if you don't have those connections already, you know how to look for them, to use databases or to know where to send it or whether to follow up or not to follow up, that kind of thing. So there's a bit more to it than just getting the press release written. Because yes, you could get ChatGPT to do it, but it's getting it published, and that's getting hard, and that's actually getting harder, not easier. It's getting harder because even online papers now will ask sometimes for payments for running stories as news, whereas previously there was a very clear demarcation between what was editorial and what was paid for, advertorial or sponsored content. I mean, there still should be a clear demarcation, but it's much harder to get things published now. You're invariably requested to say, for a magazine, say, or an online media site, well, we're interested in this, but
Yeah.
we want you to pay to place it. So it's trying to negotiate that, trying to see if you can haggle, get
Yeah.
a better outcome for your clients. So I don't think AI can do that yet.
No. No, it needs to be the person that's dealing with it. You need to have the circumstances of the client.
Yeah.
And I think for us, the transparency of that with our clients is something that we've tried to keep sort of at the forefront of the mind, because we're not going to promise for your story to get the reach that some other bigger agencies might potentially offer you and say we can guarantee that we're going to get you this coverage. We're very honest in the way the media is working nowadays.
Yeah.
And if people are going to ask for money for us to put stories, that's a conversation then that we do then have to have with our client at some point.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's interesting because we work in the same way in that you can't promise coverage. You're trying to get free editorial for them. If you can't, well, there's a stage process. Shall we consider about sponsored content? I'm talking to somebody next week who wants to place some, as they call it, thought leadership pieces. Well, they're never going to get that for free, but is it worth paying for it? So we'll have a chat around it. What I don't understand is, and I've seen this before, where a PR company will say, "Oh, well, you pay us based on where we can get it covered." Well, that's just nonsense. Because if it's a banging story, it's going to get covered in 10 places. Great, but 20 places. It's almost they possibly could have done that themselves because it's a good story. It's the harder ones where there's a bit of nuance and it has to be written well and know who to go to. That's where the skill of the PR person comes in. So yeah, I'm rambling.
No, that's what it gets me on my high horse sometimes thinking about it.
Yeah.
And that's the point of the podcast, sort of dispelling the myths around PR and what people think when they hear the words. I find
Yeah.
when people say to me, "Well, what do you do?" And I say, "Well, we're a PR company," and they're like, "Ooh," and it just seems to sometimes have such this view in the world of how that works and the people that work within that industry, that I love just putting the world to rights over it, especially the way
Yeah.
we work with smaller businesses and things like that.
Hence the podcast.
Hence the
Exactly. Yeah,
podcast. We don't want to hear the
absolutely.
BS. If you had to pick the biggest BS comment about PR that's maybe come from a bigger PR agency, what comes to mind?
Oh, do you know, that's a really hard one. That's really difficult, actually, isn't it? Well, I think the thing that's always galled me a bit about bigger agencies, which is something I don't do, is the fees they charge for what they do in return. So they can charge some very fat fees to their clients as retainers, but they don't really proactively
Hmm.
engage with that client, find out what their stories are. They always wait for the client to come to them to give them a ring, say, oh, we've got a story. Oh, great. Okay, we'll act on that then.
Mm.
But if it doesn't happen, they just sort of, yeah, sit on it. And I think that's a bit galling. And yeah, I think the amount that gets charged is a little bit eye-watering. I'd like to charge that actually. That would be nice, wouldn't it? But yeah, I don't think it's ethical. I think if you have a client, so I work with clients on a retained or ad hoc basis, it's fine, whatever suits them, really. But if you have retained clients and you provide however much time a month, I think you should fulfill that time, really, because there's always things you could be doing. So yeah, I think that's the thing that would gall me about bigger PR agencies, and that's probably what gets a bad reputation. A little
Yeah.
bit like SEO, isn't it? Oh, we spent thousands and thousands every month on SEO. We didn't get up to the Google rankings. Oh, we spent thousands on this PR agency and we never got anywhere. And they promised we'd be on the front page of the Telegraph and we'd be page 3 of the Times, all that, and didn't happen. So it's being unrealistic, charging too much, and then and inevitably not delivering. So
And that's what it's all about. And
yeah,
that's what we're combating.
exactly, which is why boutique, that's a nice word, isn't it?
Boutique.
Bijou agencies like ours, I think that's where we pick up the slack really, so we can provide a good service to smaller businesses who want some element of PR and they see the value of it. They're doing their social media, they're running events, they're going out and about networking, but they're not covering off the bit that I do, the bit that you and Fiona do, which is trying to get those stories in the relevant media,
Mm.
because there's a value in that.
Yeah. You mentioned there a word that I sort of just pricked my ears a little bit was the proactive side of it. So
Yeah,
talk to me about we often use it as sort of proactive and reactive, the way that we work to try and get as much coverage as we can for clients and tell their
yeah.
stories. Talk to me about how that works with you.
Um, well, I think it's being proactive is just ensuring you're meeting up regularly with a client online, face to face, once a month. What have you got going on? What are your stories? Planning ahead so you know what's coming up. Tapping into worldwide news events, awareness days, awareness weeks that they could piggyback for a story on.
Mm.
That's great. So you have content planned in that you could be sending out. Even if you haven't planned that month, you at least you're meeting up with them so you could chew things over and have an idea of something to send out. But as you say, reactively, when there's something coming up, budget would be an example. Um, Planning in, so well, not necessarily planning it, or something happens, the government does something, is thinking, well, actually, that's really relevant to what my client does. They'll have something important to say about that. Let's see what their comment is, and sending that comment out and trying to get some extra coverage for them. So it's sort of just being aware of what's happening in the world and the media. Yeah, news jacking, as we call it.
Yeah. Yeah. Something that I didn't realize before working in PR that that's what was happening.
Yeah,
And you read and you think that's brilliant because there's always something going on. And something that people maybe don't think about is that they can talk about that from their personal opinion side. It doesn't necessarily have to align with their business and what they're doing. And trying to get people to tell their stories in that way is something that
yeah,
maybe that people struggle with a little bit more. Is
yeah.
is getting them to realize it's not just their business, it's them as a person.
Yes, exactly. It's putting themselves front and center, which I know you're very good at with your clients. I'm a bit more of about the business, not
Mm.
less about them, but yeah, perhaps a bit more towards the business. But yeah, absolutely, it's having that because it is much more about personalities now, isn't it? Really, because
Yeah,
because of the social media world we live in, people want to see the person behind the suit. If
yeah.
anyone wears suits anymore, but yeah,
And they're reading something, and I find myself now reading something and thinking, was that them that wrote that? Have they got ChatGPT to write that
yeah,
for them? I'm just sort of trying to dispel that myself. Um,
yeah.
but it's all part and parcel of the fun. What's your favourite thing about your job?
Oh, um. I think it's the variety actually, really. I think it's just doing so many different different things for different people. And as I said, a lot of what I do is on the copywriting side too. So I get to write stories still, which I always liked doing when I was a journalist. So it's the same kind of thing, really. It's the same skill set. It's just a different outlet for it. And just, yeah, just going out and about, meeting people, writing up their news, sort of thinking, oh, that's just, that's a really good story. People should know about it. Have you thought about this? Have you thought about sending a press release off about that? Not because I want the business particularly. I just think it's just such a shame if they don't. So I think that's my favourite bit actually, because as I say, I'm very nosy. So I just like to find out what people are up to. And you can't help it really. You kind of get tuned into it all the time. So you kind of think, oh, that'd be good. So yeah, I think it satisfies my nosy nature.
That's something that I've noticed with every journalist that I speak to, or someone that was a journalist. That's tends to be what they say, is that they're just nosy, and I think
Yeah,
that's why I've enjoyed it so much, because I was generally quite nosy. I like to
yeah,
know things. I like to know how things work,
yeah, yeah.
and that can only help. I guess that sort of helps on the copy, not just the storytelling and the PR side. When you're doing copy, for people, knowing their business and them and their tone of voice and things like that, I guess that's quite important to you, is it?
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. Because if you've got it's going back to what you said. You think, have they written that, or
Mm.
there's somebody else written it for them? And it's kind of nothing wrong with that.
No.
It's a bit like having a book ghostwritten. Really, it's still their
Yeah.
story. It's just they haven't physically put the words on into the computer, as it were. But yeah, but it's got to sound like them. Which is where actually going back to AI, it hasn't quite got that yet, has it? Because I think I can spot a bit of AI at 100 paces, but I
Mm.
don't think everybody can. But it's just you kind of
Get to know
don't
someone's tone
you?
of voice, don't
Yeah,
you?
yeah, you've got to have the tone of voice, and and particularly businesses, they'll be very different. They can be very corporate, or they can be very, wacky way, hey, all hail fellow, well met. So it's got to reflect, and there's got to be a consistency there as well, actually. So and I know you can say to ChatGPT, or write it in the style of, but it's still not
Mm.
got that nuance quite yet, I don't think.
No.
So yeah.
No.
Do you
Well,
do you enjoy what you're doing then, Lauren?
I do. Oh, we're turning it around on me now. See,
Well, my
this is the
turn.
journalistic hat.
Because you're
Absolutely.
relatively new to it, aren't you? So
I am.
tell me what got you into PR, Lauren? Just get my notebook. Hang on.
Your notebook out, ready for our next story.
Yeah.
No, I do. I absolutely love what I'm doing. I used to work in a very corporate world,
Yeah.
and it was all number driven. I worked in credit control, and not the most exciting side of it. It was quite miserable, to be honest, ringing people and chasing them down for money.
Mm,
Um,
yeah.
and I've always been a nosy person. As I said, I like to know how things work and why we're doing it a certain way and how it came to be. So that's always worked well for me. And I thought journalism was what I was going to go into when I finished.
Mm.
I was heading off to university, or wasn't I? What was I going to do? Journalism was what I was going to head into. I just happened to be on that cusp of starting the year where the fees went up to 9,
Oh,
whatever.
yeah.
And that just, the way that I've been brought up, I wanted to go and earn some money and,
Yeah.
gain
No,
my
I absolutely get it.
independence.
And
So,
I'm not even sure I'd recommend people to go into journalism now, sad as it is, because
no.
it was just such good fun when I started. And I'd say start on the advert a little bit before Fiona, but she'll say there was, God, loads of reporters, photographers, sub-editors, lots of people working. It was great fun. We went to the pub every lunchtime, pub after work, a lot of pubs anyway. But it was really good fun, and we worked very hard. But it's just now local newspapers, because of the advent of online and lack of advertising revenue, and that they've just sort of gone to hell in a handcart, really. So,
Mm.
and they're important because people need to know, and they want to know what's happening in their local communities. And I think there are some local newsletters that are filling those gaps quite nicely. But as for the more mainstream, if you like, local newspapers, are just still relying on court and council stories,
Yeah,
and that's it, which is a bit tragic, actually. It's
yeah.
a real shame. So,
I
and
think it's a skill that, when I came to work with Fiona, I said, I didn't go to uni and go and get my degree. Do I need to go off? And, I'm at that age now where I've decided what I want to do.
yeah.
Grand age of 30 when I decided, yeah, this is the
Oh, old lady.
I want to work. It's difficult though when you're 17 and they're saying what do you want to do.
Yeah.
They asked me that now, I'd have a much better idea.
Yeah.
Still not 100%, but I said, should I go and have a look at doing the course? And she said, I don't think you necessarily need it for what we're doing. You
No.
learn the skills of a journalist, and I guess there's a part of it that you either have it or you don't you?
Yeah.
To be a bit nosy.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if you're working on a paper, there's various things you would. I mean, I think you need to know some journalism law
Yeah.
and how local government works, all that sort of thing. From a PR point of view, no, you just have to ask the right questions and
Mm.
write stuff. But it's building up those relationships, having those connections, and what place. The tricky bit is the placing the copy. I
Mhm.
think. Well, tricky bit is writing it well, and then placing the copy is the second stage of it. So, yeah.
Mm. Lovely. And I don't think that's something that for a little while AI is going to be able to catch up with us.
No,
Same
hopefully
for a
not.
little
No.
while.
Well, if it does, I'll have retired by then.
Lovely.
It's my
Lovely.
plan.
That's your plan.
Don't tell Fiona.
Yeah.
Oh,
Brilliant.
dear.
I think I could talk and chew the fat with you on this all day, Jo.
Oh, we could, couldn't we? But I'd start asking you questions again. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's time to end now. It's time to end now.
Oh, thank you.
No, it's been lovely to have you on and talk to you. If people want to connect with you, where can they find you?
They can find me on LinkedIn at Jo Smyth, or my website is wordworker.co.uk,
Lovely.
or yeah, or roaming around Swindon, probably with a notebook. It's an easy place to find me. That's where I was earlier. So
Excellent. Thank you so much for coming on.
lovely. Thank you, Pet.
Thank you for watching another episode of Real PR today with me, Lauren. It's been great chatting with Jo about our world of PR and the history of journalism with her. I hope you've learned as much as I have and you've enjoyed it, and I'll see you again soon.